Well, good afternoon. Michael Lightfoot, and I'm a Red Hat solution architect based out of Houston. Stop me if you guys have heard this one. An infrastructure guy and a developer walk into a bar. What do you think happens next? Well, for Frost here, Frost Bank, what happened was they found that there was a common want and a common need for a modern application development platform and delivery platform. And this idea kind of set the wheels in motion for their application modernization. But different from a lot of technology decisions, at Frost, this was really a grassroots, bottom-up idea that took hold. The result of their push up instead of technology mandate coming down is that they've got a trusted, comprehensive, consistent hybrid cloud platform now. So from Frost Bank, let me introduce Jason Moody, who's the capability leader of platform engineering, and Brian Head, who's a platform engineer on Jason's team. And they're going to talk about their journey from grassroots to production.
Yeah, so real quick, can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. So how many of you, raise your hands, if you currently are not running OpenShift, but you want to run OpenShift? Man, these lights are light. These lights are bright.
Yeah,
okay, one right here? Okay, perfect. So how many of you, so a lot of people here are running OpenShift already, so it may not apply, but how many of you have an application in mind that you want to roll out from grassroots perspective and you just don't know how to do it? Anybody have any? Couple people? Okay. So yeah, so this, our slides are not going to win competition. Very simple. We're really going to just have a conversation here with three guys. First thing I'll do is kind of go over who's Frost Bank, right? Anybody heard of Frost Bank? From Texas? Got one person in the back, or is he stretching? I'm just one person in the back. So we'll go over, I know this is an eye chart here, and I'm going to ask someone from the audience to read. I'm just kidding. I'll kind of share the big thing. The Frost philosophy is a foundation of our culture, and nothing is more important to us. Simply put, Frost builds long-term relationships with customers based on top quality service, high ethical standards, and safe, sound assets, right? So we're kind of a conservative bank, right? But also relationships is key to what we do, right? From our customer's perspective, internally to Frost, our culture, and also with vendors as well, right? Some of the big, in this slide, it's kind of out of order, but that's okay. So some of the big key factors here that we need to take into consideration is, I want to kind of share the size, right? We have about 5,000 employees. We have branches all over Texas, and we're growing, right? We're expanding, right? And throughout Texas, we have, if you come to Texas, you visit Austin, San Antonio, Houston, or Dallas, you're gonna see us all over the place. This is a symbol, right? So Frost ranks among the top 50 U.S. banks in terms of asset size, highest ranking in retail banking customer satisfaction. In Texas, from J.D. Power, 15 years in a row. Let me go to the next. Oh, this is a big one here. Name one of the 2024 best banks in America, best banks in Texas, and world's best banks in 2024 by Forbes magazine, and also named one of the best Southwest regional banks in 2024 by Go Banking Rates as well. So this is kind of our history here. Started in 1864. Some of the things that, I won't read everything here, but the big things is 1980, Frost survived in Texas banking collapse, crisis, and real estate market crash. And in fact, we were, only the only top Texas bank to emerge from the era without federal assistance or takeover. So we're very proud of it. We're a Texas bank. If you're an employee at Frost, you have to work, a full-time employee has to work in Texas as well. And then of course, there's PPP loans. We're really, really proud of that. We scrambled to get that out during COVID, and we're really proud of that as well. So setting the scene, right? I started at Frost in 2019, September, as an engineer. And I started to hear kind of like people talking about OpenShift, right? And I had known about OpenShift for years, never touched it, right? And there was two particular teams from a development teams that wanted to use OpenShift. One of them was our Frost Online Banking digital team, right? Probably our biggest development team. There was another team that also wanted it. There's a little bit smaller team, but really critical to our, I won't name names, but so they were approaching us, and we were like talking about it. We had, workshops. People, Red Hat would come in, kind of share what OpenShift was, and some people didn't get it, right? There was basically over time, there was kind of two or three sets of people. There were some people that, it was like, for us, it's kind of conservative. We're really never going to use that kind of application here. There's other people that were kind of in the background waiting for us to implement it. There was kind of waiting. And then there were the believers, right? Those that really believed that we could do it, right? So how did we do it, right? So there's another person that's not on stage with us today. He's really critical to this. His name is Taylor, and he's a principal engineer. And he was key to getting OpenShift right. I actually consider him part of the OpenShift cross-functional team, right? Because he's with us every day helping people on board as well. So you'll hear his name throughout this conversation. So with these two particular teams, they wanted OpenShift. As I was promoted up to a supervisor, I had to backfill my position. And then at the same time, that second smaller team, they had a meeting with me talking about OpenShift, so I was really excited. So Brian, we were interviewing several people for the engineer position to replace myself, and we got lucky with Brian. Brian came in, we interviewed him, and I was asking every applicant, do you know OpenShift? Do you know OpenShift? Right? Nobody. And I asked Brian, do you know OpenShift? Do you remember what he said?
I was like, no, but I'm ready. I'm ready to learn it.
Right. And so what did I tell him? You come to Frost, we're gonna run OpenShift, right? Right after that, I had a meeting with that second team that wanted to use OpenShift in our environment. They had an application they were ready to move. They wanted to move now. And so, sat down in the meeting with them, and what happened? They said, can you do OpenShift? Are you able to do OpenShift? No, we can't. It's chicken and the egg. We need to actually have it on board, et cetera. And then we could do it, right? We don't have time for that, they said. And that was it. I was like, everything was taken out and be like, there goes my opportunity. Well, 2020, something significant happened in the world. Does anybody know what that was? Can anyone guess? COVID, right? So what happened? Sent everybody home. He got hired on. We literally sent him through orientation.
And then sent home. Yeah.
I gave him a laptop. Go home. Everybody's going home. That particular project got squashed, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, okay? It was a horrible thing that happened, but at that point in time, it really helped the OpenShift push. It's unfortunate, but it did happen. So that's kind of setting the stage, setting the scene of what it's like, right? So I'll hand it over to Brian here.
Yep, so we still have a traditional VM-based infrastructure, as I'm sure everybody's familiar with. Our journey on OpenShift is still pretty young. But what we found was that developers who want to push innovation were getting hit by a wall because it takes time to build up these new VMs, this infrastructure. Each team has to touch it. Lots of SLAs involved. It could take days, depending on how busy teams are, before they could even get to try out their new ideas. So between all these conversations happening between developers and admins, really got a foothold for the need for a container platform.
So we need Kubernetes. How do we do it, right? So I am actually 30 years old. No, I'm just kidding. So why did we choose OpenShift, right? And by the way, like I said, our slides are not. I'm impressed with everyone else's slides, by the way, but this kind of keeps us on track, right? So why did we choose OpenShift? There's a number of reasons, right? What are our needs? We need faster releases, ability to fail fast, innovation, right? We want to, developers want to try something. Come up with something in the middle of the night. Next day, they roll it out in the namespace. It's a bad idea. They destroy it. No big deal. If they were to apply it, like Brian said, hey, we need 6 servers. Let's rolls through 4 or 5 different teams to get it built. Maybe they get it in a day if everybody's twiddling their thumbs. If not, maybe 3, 4, or 5 days, right? So we wanted to use blue-green deployments. Also, talent was a big thing, right? Hiring people coming in, developers. What's your infrastructure look like? We just use VMs and physical machines, and people, that was one of the biggest concerns from Taylor, right? From the development teams, and also from my team, right? The infrastructure team, right? Platform engineering we wanted, hiring people. Does, coming on, all we run is VMs, and you get an opportunity to work at another place. You get to use containers and all that, the cool tools, and also retention. People are getting offers. Maybe they want to leave, work somewhere more exciting. So that we wanted to handle that as well. And we also had, off in the horizon, we'll talk about it a little bit later on. Let's see, we'll check on time. There was an application that was coming that had to absolutely be on OpenShift. There was no way around it. So we kind of had that approach in us. And then microservices, we want to use microservices, right? That's the future, right? So why did we choose OpenShift strengths, right? Gartner, Magic Quadrant, leader, container orchestration, and app development. And as we talked to other vendors, and we started to kind of fill out, we talked to other customers of Red Hat, other people. We had other vendors, I won't name them, but we sat in front of them, they told us their story. Obviously we were really impressed with Red Hat. Everyone was saying, just go with Red Hat, use OpenShift. And also we had an existing relationship with Red Hat, not only from an infrastructure side, but from our developers, right? Developers had a really strong relationship with Red Hat. They trusted them. I will say this, I've worked with a lot of vendors over my years. A lot of them, they'll be more than happy to take your money. They'll tell you that it'll work. You buy it, and 6 months later, you have to hire developers to help integrate everything. Red Hat is the one company that I can tell you, I'm not just saying this because I'm here, I tell anybody this.
They didn't pay us to say this.
Yeah, they didn't pay us to say this. When they'll tell you, yes, we are great at this, and this is not really that mature. You may want to look at something else. And I've worked with several Red Hat teams, very consistent, and I love that. Don't ever change that, Red Hat. So I just wanted to share that as well. That was the Red Hat relationship. So here, did you want to cover this part?
Yeah, so we got a quick and dirty 1 week engagement built up, got a sandbox cluster stood up through IPI. They helped us integrate it with our LDAP and Active Directory, and we got to play around with some ODF storage stuff. So that got it up and running, got us actual hands-on in our environment so developers could start trying it out, kicking the tires, seeing if they liked it. We'll talk about the 8-week engagement a little bit later on.
Yeah, so one thing, I'll go ahead and be humble here. When we talked to Red Hat about it, I said, look, we want to use OpenShift, but I'll be more than happy to personally build an OKD environment. I have an engineering background. I've built crazy things before. And they said, have you ever built an OpenShift cluster before, a Kubernetes cluster? And I was like, no. They go, yeah, you may want us to help you. And I was like, okay. So we did the 1 week engagement. I'm glad we did that, went that route. It saved me a ton of time because I was trying to manage a team. We're doing all these things going on at the same time. It's difficult to just spend a week and actually build something out in trial and error, right? So let's see. So some of the things we had to do from a grassroots perspective was, we didn't get a directive from leadership to say, hey, you're going to use OpenShift, you're going to use Kubernetes. So from the infrastructure team, we wanted to use it, we understood the value. The developers absolutely saw it, right? And so there was like two fronts. I was talking to my leadership, convinced my boss, then he convinced his boss, all the way up to CTO, CIO, and eventually they were like, yeah. And at the same time, this Taylor person, right? He was selling on his side really hard, right? He was one of the lead software engineers, right? So he was selling it from his side, kind of converged. And it took a lot. There was a lot of naysayers, people that had doubt, and we had our ups and downs, right? So yeah, evangelizing, we had to work with various different teams. We had all kinds of workshops where Red Hat would come in. We pulled everybody into large rooms, and we just discussed the value of it versus using like other kind of virtualization tools. And then, upskilling talent, right? That's something that we continue to do. I'm proud of Frost. Frost actually they've made a decision, instead of like hiring folks outside, we actually are upskilling. I'm really proud of that, right? We're taking the people that have been with us for years. And I have one person on my team that's been with us for 40 years, over 40 years, another couple people that are approaching 20 years. So we have a lot, Frost is a lot of people that are 20 plus years, right? So instead of, leaving people on legacy gear, we're actually migrating people onto OpenShift and cloud as well. So how do you do this, right? I don't know if you want to speak to this or you.
Go ahead on that.
Okay.
Switchos, yeah.
So what do we do, right? do you pick, and I've done this before at other organizations, right? Like, what do you do? Like, do you pick your biggest application because you want the most value, the most bang for the buck? You pick your biggest application, but that's a huge amount of risk, right? But so what did we do, right? So historically, at Frost, whenever they had a risky situation like this, they had one particular internal facing app, right? Customers didn't see it. So if it crashed or failed, it was more of a lower risk, right? So we all agreed that was the proper app. And so that was the first application to go on board. And we onboarded it, it was successful. You know, we had a little bit of bumps and bruises at first when we rolled it out, but it was stable, right? We also rolled out, Red Hat changes there. We were on Ansible Tower, and we had to move to AAP, right? So the DevOps team, right? They kind of own that tool. They were like, we don't want to take the risk and put it on OpenShift. Let's just put it on VMs. But it didn't fit with VMs. It was kind of natively ready for OpenShift. And so we actually hired another engineer, Lee, right? He's like, yeah, I can get this rolled out like today. And so he just spent a couple hours in AAP, boom, it was
other things on OpenShift, it's running, we're using it. People are starting to feel more comfortable with it.
Absolutely, we use it for a lot of things. And then of course we had our Frost Online Banking. So if you go to frostbank.com right now, you just log in or whatever, or you don't have to log in, just go there. You're going to see that it's running on OpenShift as well, right? And then there's another huge application that we knew was coming, right? We're going to go live on it, and this approaching summer, so like around June, and that is a product that we have no choice but to move to OpenShift. And it's a monolithic, gigantic application with all kinds of customization. So we're actually moving that over now.
So once we kind of had all this buy-in and we're moving forward with OpenShift, that's when we took the plunge with the 8-week Red Hat engagement. And we worked with them, and just like we did with the quick sandbox build, we're like, okay, let's build the clusters up and get people on them. And they're like, no, absolutely not. We're not going to have a cluster up and running until like week 2. You're not going to see a GUI till week 3 or 4. So they had to stop and change our mindsets as far as like, you now are not working with VMs, you're working with YAML and Ansible playbooks. Everything you're going to do is through an Ansible playbook now. Infrastructure is code. That was their main purpose. Starting to break down the wall between admins and developers. So now at like the end of my day, I have to remember, do I need to check in some code, which I didn't have to do that before as an admin. So that's where they started kind of changing how we look at things and getting us used to the OpenShift environment.
Yeah, that was one thing. It was like, it's going to slow you down when we do this implementation, but it's going to pay off dividends in the future. And so we are so grateful that we're using Argo CD, GitOps, Ansible.
So everything is reproducible. We could spin up, if a cluster died, we could have it back up real quick. So it was definitely the way to do it.
So if a cluster we destroy a cluster or whatever, we could just easily deploy things. So it's super, I'm glad we made that decision. So where are we today? We're deploying OpenShift on VMware with IPI, which is crazy. One of the things I did, I just wanted real quick, one of the demos I did as part of the evangelizing is I actually had, I took a video of VMware on one side, and it had OpenShift, the GUI on one side, and I had our cluster on the left side, right? And then as soon as I went into OpenShift, I was sharing this video with everyone, how quickly you could deploy a worker node, which I had to explain that worker node is equivalent to a VM in VMware, right? So I clicked the button. As soon as I click the button up, it goes from 3 workers to 4. All of a sudden, you see in VMware, boop, it pops up a VM, and we were looking at the console. You could see it building it, and then there you go. It's working. It's taking on workloads. And I evacuated, I guess, the worker node, and then I actually started, destroyed it. Went down from 4 to 3. Destroyed it, and the video was like 5 minutes. It was crazy. And that was what really was a big aha moment for a lot of people. So that was part of the evangelizing piece. So we deployed Frost Online Banking in October, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's fresh.
Not long ago.
Yeah, and we're rescaling employees, and we discussed that already, but some of the benefits, we're actually seeing fewer CPUs, right? Fewer cores necessary. Obviously, faster deployments.
Way faster.
We actually have one application that we onboarded recently, maybe like 6 months ago, that it was running on. It was really fragile. Like everybody was scared to touch it. Patching it was scary, and so we actually migrated that over, and now they do 2-week releases. Right? That's crazy, right? So And this includes patching, right? Because you patch the images. So yeah, it's a night and day difference, right? So also security team gets container and image scanning capabilities. So this is a real quick topic. So we have another vendor, I won't name them, but it was a security vendor, big security tool that we use for all of our VMs, and it scans, but its capability was only scanning images, right? And they had a roadmap that they would scan containers and running containers and images, et cetera. And we didn't buy ACS at first, right? Advanced Cluster Security, because we kind of trusted them that they were going to be able to provide this. So 11th hour, right before we went to Frost Online Banking, went live, we actually had a discussion with them, and that was one of the requirements, is we had to have ACS or some tool to scan active containers by our security teams, right? And we're a bank, so we have like 4 security teams and audit teams and governance team, et cetera. And we told them we need to we need to be able to scan running containers. And they said, we're not going to do it. So we had like 11th hour, right? We had to get with Red Hat team. They were very flexible, and they were able to help us deploy ACS quickly. Unfortunately, it was like kind of bad for our security team because they had to learn ACS like quickly. So our advice is, and we'll probably talk about it on a different slide here in a second, get a tool. If it's not ACS, get some tool that can do the same thing that ACS can, or just get ACS, right? So yeah, best practices, listen to the voice of your customer. In this particular situation, Taylor was our customer, right? His development teams were our customers. The whole concept of build it and they will come probably wouldn't have worked for us because we didn't know what our customer wanted. So maybe it won't work maybe it could work for other places, but for us, I don't think it would have worked. Obviously, partner with your customer. Dev teams that are using CI/CD pipelines and containers already, like Docker for development, et cetera, it's pretty easy lift, right, for them to adopt OpenShift. We do have different types of development teams at Frost. We have some teams that are not as mature, so it's a little bit harder and more work involved. And then find leadership champions. Convincing my leadership, right, took time, and finally my boss was like, okay, we could do this, right? After hearing not only my side of the story, but Taylor's side of the story as well. Then he convinced his boss, and then it kind of went up from there. And
we're very lucky at Frost to have leadership that listens to its developers and engineers and actually gives us a chance to make our case, and they saw the value in it as well, so that helped us. Absolutely,
and they risked, I mean, think about it, they put a lot of money down for us to get OpenShift clusters built out, right? So definitely partner with your infrastructure teams. Another mistake that I personally made was I thought, well, OpenShift, it does all its networking inside. We don't need a networking team. We'll have them kind of involved, but not really involved. That was a mistake that I made. Once we realized that we needed a lot more of the networking team involved, it was kind of late. It was really unfair to them because we were like running, kind of playing around with OpenShift for like 9 months, and then all of a sudden, the last second, like, hey, we need you for a load balancer, and they're like, so it was really unfair. So make sure your networking team, if you have a separate, we're not the virtualization team or the storage team, so we have separate teams for that. So include your virtualization team, include your storage team as well, because it's necessary. Design security, get them heavily involved, design with security in mind. If you have requirements for creating specifications or standards, get that done early. Any kind of vendor management stuff, these are kind of things that we kind of stumbled upon. And then I think the biggest issue we had, I don't want to say a mistake, but we were given the opportunity, we're an infrastructure team, and we typically run waterfall, right, historically, and especially me, right, coming from other places I worked at. And we were given the opportunity, you want to run waterfall or agile? And we were like, well, we'll run agile. We said, well, let's do kind of a hybrid thing. So we tried it, and I said it was a risk because we've never done it before, so let's go for it. And so anyways, we ran for a long time without a PM or a product owner. Big mistake. So my advice, make sure you have a product owner, and make sure all the teams are working together, or PM or product owner. And then, of course, make sure you have a registry, right? Use Quayer or equivalent. And be prepared for success.
That's right, yeah. I mean, if you build it, they will come. Obviously, we couldn't just put all the time and resources into it and hope that customers would want to use it. We had our use cases like we talked about. But after it was up and running, and especially after our main banking application had gone live on it. I mean, application teams are just coming left and right, lining up to get their apps containerized and on our platform.
It's like, be prepared for seriously, because once, there was a lot of people that were in the background that were just kind of silent, waiting for the Frost Island Banking to go live, and once it did, it just like the floodgates opened up. And so we've kind of talked about this, keep all teams engaged, full-time PM or product owner, constant communication with leadership. We now have a 2-week communication to all of our stakeholders and our leaders to let them know where we're at. We have a document that goes out every 2 weeks that talks about these are the projects that are being onboarded. This is what the project is, this is who's running it, and these are all of our roadblocks, et cetera, right? And these are all of our successes for the last 2 weeks. And then set your limits. I don't know if you want to talk about setting your limits.
Yeah, so I mean, we had we built our cluster with plenty of resources because we're going to move our main banking application onto it. We had a few little things that we had moved onto it like we talked about, but it was just mostly sitting there idle. So we're like, this thing, we'll just put it on there, no limits, let it eat up whatever it needs to eat up, and then we'll pare it down after that once we get some metrics. Java didn't like that. Java said, you don't have limits set, I'm going to restrict myself. And luckily, another thing you should do is have plenty of monitoring, observability, Grafana dashboards. We had a Grafana dashboard that showed us the problem right away, where we saw our CPU thresholds being hit. And that's what pointed us in the direction to find out that, hey, Java's limiting us. Once we put our limits in on the cluster, everything ran fine. So
yeah, when we went live with Frost Island Banking, that was one of the issues we found. It was throttled, and we dug, as we were working the issue, we dug into the documentation, and there was that particular image, like Brian said. It said, if you do not set your limits, we will set it for you, like to 1 core. And we were like, why is everything stuck at 1 core? Yeah. And so because we had a Grafana, thank God, we were able to see it, and we were able to resolve it pretty quickly. And they engaged Red Hat early. And I think that's it. We have a few minutes left for questions.
Yeah, fantastic. So we've got 5 minutes now. So yeah, fantastic session firstly. Thank you. So I think we've got a couple of people here with questions. So come on up to the mic. Thank you. Oh, there we go.
Hi, I was just curious, so how did you guys scale out? Like how many clusters, or like how big are the cluster sizes? Like, I'm sure you guys had to like kind of figure that out and settle on something.
We're still pretty small shop. I think right now we have 11 total clusters.
Oh, okay.
The main thing was get our main app moved over, and then obviously floodgates are open. We're going to have to start scaling up pretty big now, but we oversized it to make sure it would fit and then hold new things in the future. So we have a little bit of room to bring some more things on, but obviously we'll have to keep increasing as we bring new apps on. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so we have two groups of clusters. We have a shared environment for like our Frost Island Banking and the other apps that I talked about. We have another cluster that is for that one huge monolithic application that's going to go live in June. And we kind of talked to the people that are already working with that application. And what they've said was, you may want to build a separate cluster because it's going to be slow, right?
Yeah,
it's not going to be on the latest and greatest. And then over here we have Frost Island Banking. They're going to be on the latest and greatest. They're going to be on like 4.15, 16, whatever. So we wanted to make sure that this other group of all this shared environment, they were able to be on the latest and greatest to get all the cool features, while this other one application that has this whole group of other clusters could stay on 4.14 if necessary, right? That's something you want to consider as well.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
Hey, Fernando here. How do you manage to upgrades to have different pre-production or production environments that involve rollouts of versions of CNFs that comply with the version of the OpenShift?
Yeah, we have a kind of a cadence we go through where we're upgrading up through our environments. And we have to communicate with everybody that this is what we're doing. We're upgrading dev today, we're going to upgrade test 2 days later, and then get to prod probably the week after that. And we just have to let them know that this is what's happening. Make sure you test well after our updates, and maybe not push anything up while they're in between until they're all on the same version while we're going through our patching cadence. But it's still something we're feeling out, working out as well, because we're trying to go from a VM patching world to OpenShift patching world, and we're still kind of working out the kinks, but that's kind of how we're doing it right now.
Yeah, it's kind of different and also challenge because it's continuous upgrade of the version.
Yeah.
In
Yep.
2 or 3
Constantly
different
coming out,
platforms
yeah.
at the same time,
Yep.
and also get the CNF in the correct version. It's challenging.
Yeah, it is. That's something we still have to keep working on. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the big things is a sandbox, right? Red Hat suggested early on that we use a sandbox, right? And we did, and we actually, that was one of the things we convinced our leadership was to let us just have a playground, right? Because we didn't know, like, we were going from 0 to, production, right? So we actually convinced them just to, just let us buy the smallest amount, spend the smallest amount of money to get the sandbox so we could play around with it. So Taylor was in there building stuff. We were in there playing around with stuff. We broke the cluster a few times, like irreparable. All right, we just rebuilt it. We learned it, right? We played with it. We broke it. We rebuilt it, right? And we needed to go through that, right? As fell quickly, right? So I would, like Red Hat suggested, we still have the sandbox, and so that belongs to the infrastructure team. So we could take it down. Nobody's impacted by it. The development environment, test environment, that's a bigger deal if we take it down, right? So for maintenance, so.
So do you guys use ACM to manage your clusters?
Not yet.
Not yet. I think we have it for FTM cluster.
Yeah, so we have, for our monolithic application, we bought the whole suite, right? And that came with ACS and ACM. We don't feel that we're big enough yet for that. And then the other one we kind of did kind of a la carte, the other shared cluster, because we thought we were going to use the other security tool. And so we kind of, so eventually we're going to just get the whole suite for both of them, right? And we will use ACM. So we're actually looking at the cloud, like go onboarding to the cloud. That's kind of the thing, one of the things we're going to do in the future. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So we're not using ACM currently.
Sorry, I have one more question. Now that you are running your services in OpenShift, how do you handle your local development?
I'm sorry, what was that? How do we handle our?
How do you handle your local development? What tools that you use for your inner loop / local development?
That's where we need our developer here to
Like
answer that one.
what do you mean, like
Yeah.
tools, for example, like?
I mean, do you use any Podman desktop to?
Yes. So yeah. So eventually, conventionally, before it was all of our developers for the digital side, right, the frost line banking side, they used Docker for years, and then of course they use tools like Chef. We're slowly moving over to
They are starting to
Ansible.
move into Podman
And they for various reasons they've moved over to Podman, from what I understand.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, hey, guys, Jason, Brian, Michael, thank you for coming on stage, telling your story. I don't know about I mean, this is where the real gold lies, right? Hearing from, your peers in the industry, who've been through, a project such as this and all the lessons learned along the way. That's where the real gold lies in these sessions. So thank you both. I really appreciate it. Much appreciated.
Appreciate it.